So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for attending today's iMapInvasives webinar. Today's topic is going to be what's new with iMapInvasives, and it's going to be a bit of a run through of everything that the New York iMapInvasives team has been up to this year. And as the sun sets on another field season and another year of the iMap monthly webinar series, we'd like to take a look back and see some of the accomplishments and changes that have taken place over the last year. Before we go ahead and get started, I just want to remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded, and you will be receiving an email after the webinar has concluded with a link to the recording, as well as a number of links for some of the things I talk about during today's presentation. Just because we will be going over so many different topics, there will be a lot of different links to past presentations and help documents, etc., related to the different topics I talk about today. So if you have any questions about some of the things we discuss and want to learn more, there should be resources for pretty much all of them provided at the end. But if you do have any questions during the presentation about anything I'm going over, you can go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat. We have Mitch O'Neill from the iMap team monitoring the chat box, and he'll be able to answer anything that you might have questions about during the presentation. And there will be time during the end as well to go over any additional questions. So just to do a brief overview of how this is going to go today, we'll go through a brief introduction of iMapInvasives New York Natural Heritage Program, and we will go through the iMapInvasives team, who we have working here at New York iMapInvasives, new updates on our data analysis and data collection tools, changes to the data confirmation process, changes to our website interface and the filter tool, and then a little bit about what's on the horizon coming up in later updates for iMap. So to get started, if you've been to any of our other monthly webinar series, you've heard this spiel before, but a little bit about iMapInvasives and the New York Natural Heritage Program. NYNHP is the organization that is facilitated with the conservation of biodiversity by mainly being the record keepers and data collectors for rare, threatened, and endangered species and ecosystem types throughout New York State. And as one of the greatest threats to rare, threatened, and endangered species is the establishment and spread of invasive species, the iMapInvasives network is also part of the New York Natural Heritage Program to help facilitate the goal of conservation and preservation of biodiversity. And iMapInvasives essentially exists to serve our different partners throughout the region and throughout the state, which includes our partners in the regional invasive species management, different state agencies like the DEC, Department of Parks, agriculture markets, as well as a host of other NGOs and organizations, and a whole host of community scientists who use our software and our database. And on top of just having our database for storing information about invasive species, we have a host of other services that we provide through things like automatic generated reports, early detection alerts for species or areas of interest, web map services for showing off live views of the iMapInvasive database, and track and control efforts and results for invasive species work that our partners are conducting through tracking presence not detected and treatment records in our database. So this year there have been several changes in the iMapInvasives staff lineup, and I know that a lot of our partners and people who use our software have interacted with some of the iMap team either through some of our webinar presentations, but I wanted to give a whole rundown on everybody who's involved in the New York iMapInvasives team. So starting off, I feel like I have to mention Meg Wilkinson, who was our old invasive species program coordinator and actually retired at the very beginning of 2024 after being involved with the New York Natural Heritage Program's invasive species database for over 14 years. Meg was really a big part of turning New York iMapInvasives into what it is today. It really helped to get us established as the official database of New York State for invasive species. Her work has been very important in creating what we have today and really set us up for success. And this is the current iMapInvasives team, starting off with Jennifer Dean, who took over the role as the invasive species program coordinator. Jen is the one who really keeps the lights on for the iMapInvasives team, keeps us all in check, and makes sure that we can hit all of our deliverables for our various programs and partner obligations. Next, we have Heidi Crawling, who is our invasive species information manager. Heidi does a lot of work with our bulk data sets, our partners who collect large amounts of data all at once and then want to crosswalk it into iMapInvasives. Heidi does a lot of work with these large data sets. She's also one of our team members who works partially with iMapInvasives and then partially with the greater New York Natural Heritage Program team, working with some of the other departments like botany, zoology, etc. Fate Sigma is one of our newest hires. Fate joined the team in February of this year as our invasive species advanced data manager. Fate had also previously been working with New York iMapInvasives team during his master's work, creating one of our data analysis tools that I'll actually be talking about a little bit later. But Fate does a lot of work now with some of the data that comes in using our data collection tools like the Watercraft Inspection Program app, as well as the iMap Mobile Advanced app. So if any of our professional partners are using some of these data apps, it's probably Fate who you've been in contact with, and he's doing QA/QC and crosswalking some of this data. Next up is me, Douglas Knopf, the invasive species project specialist. I too started with the iMapInvasives team in February of this year, and I primarily do a lot of the public-facing aspects of iMap, such as hosting the monthly webinar, as well as doing things like social media, website, email, and trainings for our various training using our tools, website, etc. Then we have Mitchell O'Neill, who is our invasive species biologist. You might know Mitch previously as the one who used to host these webinars and did a lot of the work that I'm currently doing. But when I started, he advanced into the biologist position. So now Mitch takes care of a lot of the information based around the species themselves, such as following up on priority records, analyzing some of the species we have in our database, and basically keeping track of what kind of information we're putting into iMap for which species. And just as a side note for Mitch as well, if anybody has been trying to get in touch with him for the past month, he has been out on leave, but he has just come back. So if you've sent him an email, you should hopefully be hearing back from him soon as he makes his way through the backlog. Next up, we have John Marino, who's our GIS applications developer. John is the one who updates and makes sure that all our data collection tools are up and running and functioning properly. Things like our mobile app, iMap Mobile Advanced, WISPA. He's the one who creates and updates all of these tools, as well as kind of maintaining our different crosswalk scripts for getting all of our data into iMap at the end of the season. And then not pictured here, but also a very important part of the team, we have Colleen Lutz, who is the assistant biologist. This is another staff member who works partially with iMap and partially with New York Natural Heritage Program. Colleen does a lot of work with bulk data sets as well, data exports, as well as running the invasive species tiers analyses every year. And that is the current New York iMapInvasives team. So next up, we're going to go into some of our new and updated data analyses and data collection tools. Starting with the terrestrial invasive species prioritization tool. So this tool is sort of a rework of an old tool that we had, the invasive species spatial prioritization tool. That tool was made originally for both aquatic and terrestrial species, but over time we sort of realized that this was not the most helpful in terms of the information that it was giving back. These tools were used to basically give a score to an area based on how important it would be to preserve the area, how ecologically rich the area was. So the combination of aquatic and terrestrial kind of overlap didn't really work. So we split them up. Previously, I believe last year, we launched the aquatic tool, And then earlier this year, we launched the terrestrial invasive species tool. So the primary goal of this tool is to help our managers to prioritize where to focus their resources, where to conduct their invasive species surveys, what resources are there that are worth protecting, and basically where the most work should be conducted. And the way this tool works is it takes 3 individual groups: conservation value, protection status, and risk of spread, and gives them a score to tally them up. Each of these sections is built out of several elements. For conservation value, we use the New York Natural Heritage Program Rare and Significant Communities layers, as well as habitat suitability models to give that a value. Protection status comes from the New York Protected Area Database, or NIPAD, as well as natural land and riparian area layers. And the risk of spread comes from landscape condition assessment, the density of invasive species that are found in the iMapInvasives database, and distance from buildings, trails, and campgrounds. Those are all the elements that make up these 3 units. And then each of these 3 units is given basically a map layer based on all of those combined elements. And they are then put together into a comprehensive score. So this is what the actual view of this tool looks like. The yellow layer is basically all 3 of those individual layers on top of each other, and it will give you a comprehensive score. Basically, you can click on any area in New York State. It will tell you about this score. It can give you more information on, how each of those 3 individual layers scored, what led into getting those scores, and it can give you information about how it ranks up against other parts of the state. So if you look at one of these like dark orange areas, like over here in Western New York, I believe this is wildlife management areas like Oak Orchard and Iroquois. So that is very dark because it has a very high comprehensive score, which means that there are a lot of natural elements there that are worth protecting. There's high risk of introduction of invasive species, and basically you want to prioritize invasive species management in that area. So this tool is good for managers who have large amounts of land, large acreages, or several properties spread out throughout a region. You can use this tool as kind of an initial overview of which areas might be more worth prioritizing. We did do a webinar on this tool last month. We had a whole hour-long monthly webinar just on using this tool with a whole bunch of use cases and a deep dive into how each of the layers works and how to manipulate the map view here. So there will be a link to that in the email that goes out at the end of this webinar. The next tool that I want to talk about is the Water Body Lookout tool, which we are affectionately naming WALT. This is one that I mentioned that Fate had worked on during his master's thesis. And basically this tool is used as sort of a first line of defense if you are looking to get a initial view of what sort of invasive species are found in your water body. So this takes data directly from the live iMapInvasives website, or the database rather, and it can give a quick synopsis on which invasive species are found. You can filter it through 3 options. There's water body selections, county selections, and species selections. So as you go through each of those, it will narrow down the other of the 2 lists. So you can select water bodies. It will give you a whole list of all the water bodies that we have in our database. Basically, when you submit any data point into IMAP, it will automatically assign it location data. So if you are, floating in Lake Champlain and you take a point for an invasive species, it will automatically assign it to the Lake Champlain water body. And that allows us to filter out in this tool. It will also tell you what county by default the water body is located in, right next to the name there. If you see at the bottom of this list, how there's like Allen Lake in Allegheny and Allen Lake in Oswego County. And that is because a lot of water bodies are not very originally named. So if you wanted to look up information on what is in long pond or mud pond, and you realize that there's like 10 long ponds and 10 mud ponds in New York State, this just helps to initially differentiate which one you're talking about. Then for counties, the same thing, all the counties in New York, as well as counties from neighboring states. So if there's any water bodies that are along the political boundary, such as Lake Champlain, it will give you the counties in the adjoining states as well. And then for species, you can select whichever species you are interested in. And you can also check off multiple for any of these boxes if you are interested in, several counties or several species. You can have more information there. So if we were to fill out some of this data, like if I wanted to know where all of the brittle naiad was in Albany County, I could set those. It would tell me how many brittle naiad hits there were in the entirety of the iMapInvasives database for Albany County. And then down below, it would give me a list of all the water bodies that this was found in. And this is really great if you're already out in the field and you want to get a quick idea of, if you show up to a water body and you say, I want to know if there's a certain species in here, but I don't want to load up the entire iMapInvasives database on just my smartphone. This is a much, more condensed data analysis tool. It'll load a lot faster and give you a lot more, focused answers onto what you're looking for. So there is a mobile-friendly version as well. And you can take the information that you get from this water body lookout tool, and you can bring it back to the main iMapInvasives website for further analysis. So if we use the same use case example, brittle naiad in Albany County, we can then put that into the main iMapInvasives database in the filter tool, and we can use the distribution layer to highlight all of the water bodies where it's found. So right away, you can look at this map view here, and you can see, okay, there's a couple of small lakes here, one over here in Westmere, and then there's some hits in the Hudson River and Mohawk River. So it just gives you sort of a more visual look at what the water body lookup tool was telling you. And then you can go ahead and go even further with that on the database. You can use the identify and measure tool to make a box around one of the water bodies, and it will tell you all of the data that is found at that water body. And you can find more information like when it was observed, who made the observation, what organization they were with, and then you can click details to get more specific information on a specific record, such as additional comments or photos of the species, etc. So the water body lookout tool really gives you a good initial analysis of what kind of stuff you might want to look for instead of having to kind of guess or filter through the main database right away. And then the last data analysis tool that we had an update for is our management outcomes viewer. So the management outcome viewer is a little different than our other tool like Walt in that it doesn't have a live view of the iMapInvasives database, but it has basically a snapshot of what it was. So very recently, the tool was updated for all of the data through May 21st of 2024. And basically how the management outcome viewer works is it will take all of the data from a specific area. So if you go to one site on one property year after year and you take data, it'll layer all of that data on top of each other and it will turn it into one management area. And it will analyze all that data. So if you go 1 year and you take a survey and you take a big polygon around a patch of Japanese knotweed, and then the next year you go back and you do treatment. The year after you go back and survey, the polygon's a little bit smaller, you do treatment again. Next year, there's only a few small individual points, you do treatment again. You go back a 4th year and there's nothing there, you do non-detected. It'll take all of that data, layer it on top of each other, and analyze the change through time. And it will let you know if the conditions at your site are progressing, regressing, or staying the same towards your management goals of either suppression or eradication. So this is just, again, a snapshot of the main tool as soon as you load in without doing any sort of filters or anything. And you can see here that a lot of the management areas that it is assigned are of unknown condition, basically meaning that data hasn't been collected at that site long enough to make a solid determination of what's been going on there. But for areas where data has been collected for a long time, a majority of them have a positive progression, meaning that the site is progressing towards what the land manager wants it to be, which is, like I mentioned, usually suppression or eradication of an invasive species. So if you have been returning to a certain site year after year and collecting data, you may consider using this tool just to have a look at, as far as data standpoint, what it says the conditions are doing, if they are getting better or getting worse. And that is it for our data analyses tool. So up next, we're going to go into data collection, data confirming. So real quick with just our data collection tools, there's not a lot of huge changes to report for those. Most of our tools have just sort of been receiving general updates and upkeep and maintenance throughout the season to keep them running smoothly. There has been one update for not the IMAP Mobile Advanced tool itself, but the IMAP Mobile Advanced crosswalk script that we here at IMAP use. So like I mentioned before, for some of our tools like IMAP Mobile Advanced, which is hosted on ArcGIS Online, the information after it's been reviewed and marked ready for upload gets crosswalked through a script over into the iMapInvasive database. And this year we have been doing some improvements to that script, which basically means it's a lot faster and more efficient for us to move that data over from IMAP Mobile Advanced into iMapInvasives. And that has allowed us to be pretty much completely up to date with the 2024 data. As our partners have been marking it ready for upload and reviewing it, we've been able to get it in much faster than we have in previous years. This also means we're going to be able to get through a lot of the backlogged data from previous years. And then one change for one of our data collection tools, the Survey 123 form. You can now use streaming for making polygons or polylines when you're taking presence, treatment, or not detected records. This is just a screenshot of what it looks like to use the Survey 123 form. And those two new options on the bottom are for streaming or using your location for collecting data. Previously, you just had to use the map view and sort of draw it out, but now you can use actual real-time location data to use this tool. And just with any of our data collection tools, if anybody was on the All Prism call a little bit earlier, you heard Jen Dean mention this, but if anybody has collected data this season and has any data still living on any of these tools, we just ask that you do your final rounds of QA/QC and review, and then make sure that they are all uploaded. So if you're using the mobile app, making sure that everything has been uploaded off of your device. If you're using any of our Survey 123 supported forms, like the general data collection form or the forest pest data collection form, making sure that there's nothing in the drafts folder and everything has been sent and is in that sent folder. And then for IMAP Mobile Advanced, making sure that everything has been reviewed and has been marked ready for upload to iMapInvasives. Each searched area has to be specifically marked as such for us to know it's ready and to get it into our database. Up next, a little bit of information on changes to data confirmation. So for anybody who has been working for a professional organization or for some of our volunteers, you might be familiar with the process of confirming data in IMAP. Any data that goes into IMAP using some of our tools will automatically be set to unconfirmed until an expert reviewer can take a look at it, say, yes, this is the species it was reported as, or no, it isn't. And then it will be confirmed, and then it will show up in the database for anybody to be able to see. So we've had a little bit of changes with the process of swapping it from unconfirmed to confirmed. Starting off the button to start the review process, Used to be just called confirm, but now we're calling it review because it isn't necessarily just used for confirmation anymore. So when you hit the review button, this little box will pop up, which should look familiar. It's very similar to what it was during the confirmation process. The big notable difference is this line right on top, confirm record, yes or no. So this box is always set to yes by default if you are doing a review process. The rest of the information won't change for that. You can choose your confirmation method, either from the photo that is provided, expert review if you were on the site with an expert, partner data, if it's locally common, etc. Whatever the reason is that you're able to confirm the data, that stays the same. And then species verified by whatever your IMAP ID is. But notably, if you are reviewing a record and there is something wrong with it, like there isn't a photo, or maybe the photo is just too blurry for you to be able to tell exactly what it is, instead of having to leave it blank, you can swap over this confirm record box to no, and you can choose a confirmation method of either insufficient to confirm if you aren't 100% sure it isn't an invasive, but you can't say for certain that it is, and there might be some value in keeping the record there. You mark it insufficient to confirm. This way it'll show up as being reviewed, but it won't be just set as confirmed. We also have a new option for recommend for deletion. If it is very clearly, a record that was put in by mistake, if the species in the photo is a native species that somebody had mistaken for an invasive species, you can mark it as recommend for deletion. And then periodically, IMAP staff will go through these records and we will review them and delete any ones that we deem necessary to be deleted. We also ask that if you are marking any records as either insufficient to confirm or recommending for deletion, that you do add some form of confirmation comment just to let us know what you saw on the record that made you come to the conclusion of recommending it for deletion or saying it's insufficient. And then we do check for mistakes, but we understand that mistakes do happen. Sometimes if you're marking something for insufficient, you might forget to swap this over and it will end up being confirmed but marked as insufficient. And then once something is confirmed in our database, you can't just swap it back to unconfirmed, or you might not even notice this happens. So if you come across a record that's labeled as recommended for deletion or insufficient to confirm, but it's confirmed, you can let us know about it. You can either send us a link to the record directly, or you can send us this presence number and we can find the record and we'll be able to swap it back. We also do periodically check through the database for records that are marked as such, confirmed in either one of those methods. And we might reach out to you if we're unsure what you were trying to do with it. But it's a common mistake. Everyone on the IMAP team has already made it at least once. So it's not a huge deal if it does happen. You can feel free to just send us a quick email and we can take care of it for you. And speaking of data confirmation, so we have our fake species for testing as a way to test your different data collection tools and to see if everything is working properly. And traditionally, if it was the first time a fake species was found in a new county, it would set off an email alert. If anybody has email alerts set up for first in county records, occasionally you might have seen a fake species pop up. We've gone through and we have created a data set that will essentially stop fake species for testing records from showing up on those first in county email alerts, while at the same time making sure that none of those fake species records that we put in as confirmed will show up in any of your automatic generated reports. So if you're doing a species list by geography for an entire county, the fake species won't show up there as a confirmed record, but it will also not show up in any of your email alerts anymore. And just while we're on the topic of fake species for testing, we do know that some people will use the fake species records for sort of like a placeholder record. If you find something notable in the field, like a certain plant or plant form or something that you want to take note of the location, People will use a fake species record just to kind of mark the location, make a comment on it or something. We do periodically go through the IMAP database and wipe all of those records. So if you are one of the people who uses the fake species records for placeholders, make sure that you take any information from those records off as soon as you are able, because at some point during the winter, all those records will be wiped in the database and any information that was there will be lost. Up next, we have some changes to the batch edit tool. So the batch edit tool is a data editing tool that is available to any organizational or jurisdictional admin. It basically allows you to pull a whole bunch of records from either your organization or your jurisdiction and make mass edits to them all at once. So previously, you were only able to pull up to 100 records into the batch edit tool. We have since had that updated, so you can pull up to 500 records into the tool at once. So here on the right, we have a screenshot of 146 records in the batch edit tool at once. It can only show up to 100 records per page. You can lower this to 50 or 25, I believe, if you want to just be able to see less at a time. And then there will be this little arrow in the corner to allow you to scroll through the different pages. And the bulk edit or the batch edit fields that you are able to change, we've had a couple that were added. So previously it was project, confirmation, species, organization, deletion, confidentiality, but we have also added observer and admin comments to those fields that you are able to change. And then in the lower right-hand corner, if you are unfamiliar with the tool or you're an organizational admin, you want to start using it more, there is a direct link to our help doc on it that has also been updated with some of the changes. And again, this is only available if you are an organizational admin or jurisdictional admin. Next up, a few changes to the filter tool on the main iMapInvasives database web viewer. So one change is with the hex summary layer. So traditionally, if you had presence points enabled and you zoomed way out on the map, you'd see these sort of gray hexagons with orange circles in the middle, and basically that was a representation of the aggregation of all the data within that area. There has been a change now that the hex layer is a separate entity in the layers tab from the confirmed present species layer. Previously, they were kind of morphed into one, and when you were zoomed out to a certain level, it would automatically be hexagons, and when you zoomed into a certain threshold, it would automatically change to just the points, lines, and polygons for whatever your filter settings were. This has since been changed to separate them. You can also change what the hex summary represents. So by default, it will represent the confirmed present species, but you can also have it represent the unconfirmed present species or both confirmed and unconfirmed. You can also toggle them on and off independently of each other. So you can see here, we're zoomed out, so the hex layer is on, but the confirmed present species layer is also on, but you just can't see it, it's grayed out. But if we were to zoom in to a specific area, like if we were to zoom into Syracuse here, the hex layer would then gray out and the confirmed present species layer would turn blue and light up, and you would start to see the actual points, lines, and polygons for the confirmed presence records. The other main change that we've made with the filters and the layers, the way they are displayed, is each layer will now give you a number of records that was found for whatever your filter settings were. So for my filter settings here, I believe I just chose to show all Tree of Heaven records, and that was the only setting I made. And it will now show you the exact number of records for each layer that that the filter tool was able to pull. And it will show, the records for layers that you don't have turned on. It'll run all of that analysis in the background and only show you whichever ones that you have toggled. This way, previously, if you had run, you filled out your filter and you ran the filter and the wheel was spinning for a while, and then nothing happened. Sometimes you were wondering, was it still trying to load, or did it fail to load, or did it crash? And basically this change will take the guesswork out of that. This way, if these numbers show up and it shows that there are records that were pulled, but you don't see anything on the screen, maybe the map viewer didn't load properly, or if there were no records pulled by your filter options, it will specifically tell you as well. It'll say no records visible for current filter in one of these lines here, instead of giving you a number. So it kind of takes the guesswork out of, did my filter load properly, or does my filter tool work with the data that I'm currently trying to pull. Okay, and then the next change that I want to highlight is to our certified trainers network. So a little bit of background. Back in some of the earlier days of iMapInvasives, we had Brittany Rogers create a project as part of her master's thesis at SUNY ESF. She created the Certified Trainers Network, and basically what that was is iMapInvasives staff would train environmental professionals on how to give iMapInvasives trainings, because we were growing, expanding very rapidly, trying to get as many users using iMapInvasives as possible, and we wanted to make sure that people were able to give quality trainings. So we had this network of certified trainers, and basically they would be the ones to kind of conduct these trainings to whichever groups, professional organizations, or community scientist groups that wanted to learn how to use IMAP. The problem that we ran into, which is a great problem to have, is that we really expanded past the point of this being practical. iMapInvasives has really become sort of a household name with invasive species data keeping in New York State, which is fantastic. But it also means that we can't necessarily keep track of everybody who is doing these trainings. So in an effort to kind of adapt to that, we've done a little bit of a rebrand. Not much has changed other than it's no longer the Certified Trainers Network. It's simply the iMapInvasives Training Network. You no longer need to be certified in order to host an iMapInvasives training. Anyone is available to do this. If you feel that you are, familiar enough with iMapInvasives as a database, and you have a group of people that you want to give a training to, by all means, you are welcome to do so. And it's not like we could have stopped you before, but now we are actively encouraging people, if you want to host these trainings, by all means, go ahead and do so. The actual content of the training materials that we provide hasn't really changed much. We still have our PowerPoint training template, and we have a recorded training webinar that's sort of used as like a preliminary watch this to learn how to do a training sort of thing. It does have some outdated language in it, especially with the Certified Trainers Network. So we will be doing a new one of those next year and updating that, but it's still perfectly viable to use at any point between now and then. We have also updated some of our forms that are available. So if you see here on the right side, this is just a screenshot of the training page on the iMapInvasives website. Some of these training resources have been updated to new forms, mainly the pre-training, post-training, and evaluation forms. The pre-training form is used if anybody is kind of hosting their first ever iMapInvasives training and they want any sort of feedback or advice on how to plan it. It can also, call on old elements of the Certified Trainers Network if you're looking for assistance from iMapInvasives in hosting a training. We can either hook you up with a local professional that can possibly come out and help with a training in person, or if you're doing virtual trainings, we can, again, hook you up with one of those people, or have somebody from the iMapInvasives team join as well. I've joined in a number of virtual trainings for groups all over the state, just to sort of give a brief overview of how IMAP works. The post-training form, although, like I had mentioned, it is difficult to kind of collect those metrics from everybody who is conducting these invasive species or iMapInvasives trainings, we do still like to hear from our partners and people who are doing these trainings, and just hear how the trainings are going. And this helps to give, a numerical metric of about how many people are being trained in iMapInvasives throughout the year. We do like to include those metrics in our quarterly and annual reports. So if you are still holding trainings, we ask that you do fill out that form after your trainings as well. And then there is an evaluation form, which is more geared towards attendees if you are looking for feedback on how your presentation went. And that's it for most of the big updates to iMapInvasives, what we've been working on and what we've launched throughout the year. We do have, several things on the horizon. This isn't by any means an exhaustive list of the things that we're working on. There's always 100 projects on the iMap back burner that we're working on. And we tend to go into a little bit of a deeper dive on what's coming up in the future during some of our early webinars, like in the spring of 2025, usually after like our user feedback meetings. We'll kind of make a plan on what sort of changes we want to make in the coming year. But just sort of on the immediate horizon of some of the things that we're working on. New and updated help documents. Obviously, we launched a lot of new data analyses tools, and we have our, large list of help resources that we're kind of going through, analyzing which ones need to be updated or removed or changed. So throughout the winter, there will be a lot of changes and additions to that. Right now, I can tell you that there's a help document completed for the new confirmation process, as well as a little bit of information on how to use iMap Mobile Advanced and the terrestrial prioritization tool, as well as the water body lookout tool. So a lot of those are kind of in the final stages and will be put onto this help resources map fairly soon. And then a few of the old ones or outdated ones will be removed, just to kind of help clean this up and make it a little more user-friendly. A tool that we are hoping to someday kind of get together that we're looking into more recently, an eDNA results viewer. This is sort of way further down the pipeline, but has kind of come up in conversation a little more recently as more organizations are using eDNA for things like detection of invasive species in water bodies or detection of biocontrol agents that have been released for the control of invasive species. A lot of partners looking at kind of creating a centralized data viewer for eDNA sampling. And iMap is looking into the possibilities of creating that sort of a results viewer. So that's not necessarily in the immediate future, but something that we're working on for further down the pipeline. We're looking at tracked species changes. This is a big thing that Mitch does in his position, kind of looking at what kind of data is coming in for which species, analyzing new research for species that may have initially been considered to be invasive, but might just simply be non-native or not as aggressive as we initially thought, or for species that are kind of in a point of contention, like whether or not black locust is actually an invasive or if it's just a non-native. So we analyze the species that are in the iMapInvasives database. We currently have, I believe, 533 species that we track. So we're always looking at, adding new ones and removing ones that aren't necessary to track anymore. Mobile app improvements. This is something that we've wanted to implement for quite a while, but we are still looking at it as the next large update to the mobile app, having a type ahead option, similar to the way it functions in the iMapInvasives online database when you're typing a species into like the filter. As you type it, it will automatically give you, what you're looking for. We're hoping to implement that in the mobile app as well, just to make it a little bit easier to report species. Mapping challenge adjustments. So every year we have our 3 main mapping challenges: the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid mapping challenge in the winter, New York Invasive Species Awareness Week mapping challenge for Tree of Heaven and Spotted Lanternfly. And then we have our annual mapping challenge that goes throughout the month of July. And next year in 2025 is going to be the 10th anniversary of our annual mapping challenge. So we're looking at the possibilities of doing something special for that. Nothing is set in stone yet, but we've got a few ideas. Possibilities are including bumping it up to 10 species and then allowing all of our partners like the 8 PRISM regions, Ag and Markets, and DEC to choose a priority species that they think is important to map, or it represents a data gap in New York State. And then we're looking at, additional changes like, additional prizes or trophies. We have trophies that go out to the different prisms for the current species, but if we have, 10 new species, we'll have to have a whole new host of trophies. So again, none of that is set in stone, but there will be some changes to that coming in the next year. And it will also line up very well with next year's Invasive Species Expo. And just in case anybody hasn't heard much about the Expo, this will be happening next year, September 14th through 16th, 2025 in Saratoga Spa, State Park in the Capital Region, and is sort of the, statewide expo for invasive species information. Planning is underway for that. And this is likely going to be the last time for quite a while that it is held in Saratoga Spa. So if you need an excuse to get out to this part of the state, I highly recommend attending this year. Back to IMAP stuff. Last thing is just new content. Obviously we're all getting into, the winter work of reporting and data analysis, but I don't do any of that in my position. So you can expect new things like blog posts, YouTube videos, and just sort of outreach content from the IMAP team to be coming through the winter months. And then, like I mentioned before, there's always things that we're working on in the background. So keep your eyes open for different IMAP projects that are kind of released throughout the year. And with that, that brings us to the end, a little bit early, of this IMAP monthly webinar. And again, this is going to be the final IMAP monthly webinar for 2024. We will be picking up with the monthly webinars again starting in January 2025, and then having them coincide with the last Wednesday of every month. I'm going to take a brief hiatus in the summer months when everybody is out doing field work. But for the most part, they coincide with the monthly All Prism calls. And if anybody was on today's monthly All Prism call, they had mentioned that there is going to be one in November. I'm not entirely sure if that actually is the case. I was under the impression that it is not, but either way, there is no IMAP monthly webinar for next month. This is the final one for this year. And with that, I would like to say thank you to everybody who has attended this webinar and has been attending the monthly webinars throughout the entire year 2024. And since we won't be able to see you for quite a while, everyone here at iMapInvasives wishes everybody a happy, healthy, and safe holiday season. And just a quick reminder again to make sure you upload all of your data. If you have any hanging out on any offline areas or mobile tools, to make sure you get that into us. Target date is November 15th for any outstanding data. But yes, thank you all very much. I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat now. So let's see, do that, and we'll stop sharing, and we'll open up the chat. And it looks like Mitch has been pretty on top of all of the questions that we've been getting. Okay, question from Faith. Is this type of IMAP available for PA and New Jersey residents? So iMapInvasives is an organization that kind of goes throughout North America, but it is a state-by-state basis. Pennsylvania is a state that uses iMapInvasives, yes. New Jersey currently is not, but is looking into the process of becoming an IMAP state. So hopefully within the next year, 2 years, if this is something that they decide on doing, the IMAP network will be extended into New Jersey, yes. And even if you are in a non-IMAP state, you can still submit data to iMapInvasives. It's just that there won't be basically an infrastructure to do anything with that data. So like people who can confirm the data, or people who make like the data analyses tools that we make for New York iMapInvasives, that groundwork just won't be there for those states. But you can still collect the data in any state in the US and in any Canadian province as well. A question from Kristen. If you are looking for a specific record data set, you can send an email directly to iMapInvasives at dec.ny.gov. Just asking for it. We'll probably send you a data request form, and you can fill that out. Usually within 1 to 2 weeks, we can get you any sort of data set that you're looking for. Question about the 2025 Invasives Expo. I don't believe there's any official notice of it yet. That should be going up on nyis.info at some point in the future. It is still almost a year out, so I don't believe there's any official page up for it now. But once it's up, it'll probably be pretty heavily publicized. Things like the iMapInvasives social media, DEC social media, DEC delivers newsletter. A lot of people will kind of let you know that it's up and public. But yeah, that should be up on the nyis.info website, I believe. But once it's up, you'll know. All right. Any additional questions before we log off? All right. Well, in that case, again, thank you everyone very much for attending, and we will see you again in January. Thank you all very much.